In those days, that more resembled the past models of orchestra, like in the times of Beethoven or Brahms. There were no standing orchestra ensembles like the Boston Symphony Orchestra. All the music that was made for orchestra was generally made either by court orchestras or by freelance orchestras that were put together with the intent of playing some new piece. Beethoven often, organized and put together his own concerts with orchestras, and he was often the soloist. But the reason the orchestra came into being, the modern orchestra that we know, is because they were organized for concert-specific events related around what was then contemporary music. So I wanted to recreate that model in an effort to try to freshen up programming and get back to the roots of what created all this great Western symphony orchestra music that we know. It all came basically from a new music model. So that was the premise. It just turns out that we ended up doing almost exclusively, not necessarily just new, but recently new and things within 100 years.
Well, it's a prolific recording orchestra. You've got all these albums and your own record label, as a matter of fact, BMOP Sound, so they can find all your albums on your website, the BMOP website. And you also have a digital radio station there, by the way. Was that part of your vision for the orchestra when you founded it?
Well, I'm not sure it was, in the initial thinking, other than I was always particularly interested in recording. I'm an avid record collector and audiophile, and it was always a passion of mine. But it also is a mechanism for communicating well outside the concert halls that you play in. If we can reach an audience here in a concert of 1,000 people, that's great. But if we release a recording, we can release reach a worldwide audience. All over, we sell recordings and people download our every corner of the world. So I felt that this music needed to be advocated for, and I didn't want to just do it in the concert hall. And I wanted to have, more legs and more impact worldwide, and that's how we started our own record label.
Yeah, well, let's talk about your 100th album, which just came out. You think of 100th, your centenary album. I mean, you wanted to do something special, I'm assuming. And this album, you've got the ballets of a composer named John Alden Carpenter, who passed in the 1950s. He was born in the previous century. I wonder why you chose him for this recording. Well,
I think a lot of it had to do with the question you asked, a couple seconds ago, which was why new music? And we wanted to really enforce the aspect of the group that was about music that was new, but just not yesterday, more like 70 or 80 years ago. And I also wanted a big orchestra disc. We've had very big orchestras in some of our recordings, and sometimes medium-sized orchestras, and sometimes small, depending on, the requirements of the repertoire. But I thought for 100, we needed a big disc. Big, flashy, noisy orchestra disc, and that's why I picked these great ballets that have pretty much been lost to the public for a long time now.
Yeah. Well, listeners here will be familiar with Skyscrapers. That's one of the ballet pieces that you've got on here, but you've also got a couple of other ones that I don't know, and I listened to a little bit, and it sounds very jazzy. There's a lot of kind of seminal stuff going on.
Yeah, the ballet that opens the disc, it's called Crazy Cat. And Crazy Cat was a cartoon, a syndicated cartoon that ran in the newspaper empire of William Randolph Hearst. So it was in all the Hearst papers, and everybody knew Crazy Cat. And Crazy Cat had different adventures, but he was always being taunted by a mouse, and he was usually getting hit in the head with a brick. And Carpenter decided to jump on the popularity of the Crazy Cat cartoon. He was sort of Mickey Mouse before there was even Mickey Mouse, and wrote this ballet. But he wanted to show the fun nature of the comic strip. So he used what at that point was being called, sometimes it was even being called JASS, Jass. And he did it before Gershwin wrote the Rhapsody in Blue and before Mio used jazz in the creation of the world. It may be the first symphonic use of jazz idioms.
Can you talk a little bit about this other ballet, The Birthday of the Infanta? Because I don't know that either.
Yeah, well, not many people have heard it, or nobody that's alive has heard it till now, because he wrote 3 ballets, these 3 that are on the disc: Crazy Cat, The Birthday of the Infanta, and Skyscrapers. And The Birthday of the Infanta was earlier, but it's based on the Oscar Wilde short story, The Birthday of the Infanta, which is the same story that Zemlinsky used to write his opera The Dwarf. And it's a tale of a Spanish princess who on her birthday receives the gift of a live human being. And quite tragic in the end, but it was a well-known story at the time, and it's in the ballet because it's a Spanish story. Carpenter uses lots of, Spanish-flavored dance music, and there's a bullfight portrayed in the action of the ballet. It shows the breadth of his compositional skill, and he was a great orchestrator and known for that worldwide, and you can really hear it in that piece.
Well, it definitely flushes out a bit of a repertoire for radio stations that are beholden to recordings. I wonder if that ever falls into your idea of creating a new recording. You're saying, we're recording something, we're bringing it to light, we're recording it for the first time. Does that fuel your decisions as to repertoire?
Absolutely. In fact, I think it's what I've often said gets me up in the morning. There's so much amazing, and in our case, American repertoire that we specialize in, but there's so many amazing American pieces that were popular or had their moment in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s even, had their moment. They were played a few times, and then they literally just fell off the face of the earth. And really accomplished composers and major pieces by these composers that probably were destined to sit unknown maybe for forever, unless there would be a recording of them, because then if there's a recording of them, conductors or orchestras can know about them and see how attractive they might be to live audiences. So it's our mission to make sure as many projects as we can do to resurrect pieces that have disappeared, mostly because of the lack of there ever being a commercial recording. And we try to rectify that all the time.
I want to talk about your most recent album as well, because it features the music of Paul Dooley, who has a longtime association with University of Michigan, which is in our Signal area. And I wonder if you can tell us, this is the first time you've recorded his music, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us how you became familiar with Paul Dooley's music and what was the genesis of this particular recording called Masks and Machines, I should say.
The disc came about because of a soloist on the disc, Lisa Fager, who's the percussionist on the closing piece on the disc called Circuits and Skins, which is a percussion concerto with electronics accompanied by orchestra. So Lisa and I have made a bunch of recordings together over the years of other composers and other percussion concertos. And she had commissioned this piece, and she brought it to my attention, and I was bowled over by it. I thought, this is a real knockout. And that's how I got to know Paul and discovered other pieces that he had, and decided it was important that this talented young American composer's orchestra music got known. So we rolled up our sleeves and got to making an orchestra disc.
And it's great, and it's recorded so well. I wonder, has your aesthetic for recording the orchestra changed over the years? I mean, this is 101 albums. I assume you've got it right now.
Well, that's a great question. I think about that all the time. And I actually, when we were getting close to finishing the 100th album, I thought to myself, it might be a good idea to go back and do some listening to 100 albums is a lot of music. And in fact, it's actually more like 130 albums because we have releases on other labels too. The 100 CDs are on our label, but there's many other recordings on other labels, that we did before we started the label and even since. So I decided I was going to make a big project for myself and go back and listen through everything. And that question you just asked has been something I've noticed. That it varies. I think Paul's disc, you're right, has got it right. And some of them are more right than others. And that has a lot to do with all the varying factors. What halls are you in? We're not always in the same hall. The composers themselves, some music jumps right off the page acoustically and can be captured in a very, like Paul's music does, it can be captured in a way that jumps right out of the speakers. And some music is not as, I don't know what the word is. It might be sharp, but it has something to do with how composers use the overtone series, I think. But in this sort of survey I've been doing of all the recordings I conducted and produced, I've noticed, it was not always a straight climb upward, but we definitely have figured out a system.
Well, the Paul Dooley piece, when you listen to it, you don't think of its orchestra with electronics. You might hear the percussion a little more, but it's an interesting balance that you've got there in that recording.
Yeah. Well, and the electronics are just on the percussion concerto at the end.
Yeah.
But it also features a fabulous horn soloist, Adam Unsworth, who teaches at the University of Michigan also. And it's a great disc for people to sample the composer, Paul's music, and also the orchestra sound.
Well, we're going to put that information all up on our website at wgte.org. And I wonder if you can pick a track. It can come from the 100th album or the 101st album that we'll go out on.
You should go out on. Okay. You should definitely go out on Paul Dooley's the opening track.
Point Blank.
Point Blank.
Yeah.
It's just an orchestra showstopper of the first water.
Well, Conductor Gil Rose, thank you so much for coming to us and talking about BMOP as well as all the wonderful recordings that we've got here, including the 100th recording that you've made with the orchestra as well as Paul Dooley's recording. Thank you for your time.
All right, great.
Take care.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Thanks. All right, bye-bye.